And while Malcolm Turnbull appears to be a hit with many voters, there's been mixed reaction from colleagues and commentators. The new Prime Minister is reportedly moving to appease his Conservative colleagues with policy deals on climate change and same-sex marriage.
The Prime Minister's first pen stroke.
Congratulations, Prime Minister. Thank you.
Written in ink but dotted with blood. This man's blood. 4 days from 2 years in the top job, a defeated Tony Abbott was dignified.
I thank my country for the privilege of service.
Before taking aim at the press pack.
And a febrile media culture has developed that rewards treachery by acting as the assassin's knife.
Our fifth leader in as many years made his first captain's call for a stronger coalition. And it appears to be working. A 7 News Reachtel poll revealing the Liberal candidate for Canning, Andrew Hastie, jumping 10 points on the back of his new boss.
I think Mr Turnbull does give us the best prospect of defeating the Labor Party.
Good news for some.
I have a very simple approach to these things. The King is dead, long live the King.
He's a class act, Abbott, and all I've said to him is hold your head high.
Journalist, businessman and politician Malcolm Turnbull has vowed to uphold classical Liberal values. Maintaining the government's stance on same-sex marriage and climate change. Begging the question,
will the Prime Minister change the substance of this government, or is it just about its style?
Joe Hockey will introduce new tax legislation targeting multinational firms when Parliament sits today, before being replaced by Scott Morrison next week. Hayden Nelson, 7 News.
Australian journalist Peter Grester still doesn't know if he's been pardoned by Egypt's president after 2 of his TV colleagues were set free from prison. The Al Jazeera network employees had their convictions for spreading false news quashed, along with a third but unnamed person from the same broadcaster.
Breaking news on a comedy show, but this wasn't a joke.
Oh my God. That Mohammed Fahmy has been pardoned.
We've been fighting for the past 8 months for this, and I mean, Christ, I'm sorry.
Let's hope it is for both of them.
Peter Grester's Al Jazeera colleagues Baha Mohammed and Mohammed Fahmy freed by presidential pardon. Unshackled from uncertainty, allowed to leave this Egyptian jail.
We're going to travel the world, we're going to celebrate, we're going to party. These are issues that should not be handled in the criminal court.
A statement by Egyptian President El Sisi ordered a pardon for 100 prisoners, including the 2 journalists on the eve of Eid, an Islamic holiday. Their chase for a story took them to this Cairo courthouse, where they say injustice was served. Baha Mohammed found guilty of supporting terrorism. Grester was deported in February. Yesterday he was walking with the Prime Minister at a ceremony honouring war correspondents.
Just as important in preserving our freedom as any politician.
For this news crew, their fight is for freedom of speech.
Until we get all of our names cleared, until everybody who was originally charged and convicted in this case has their names cleared, this isn't over.
One they won't be stopping soon. Hayden Nelson, 7 News.
A Palestinian man posing as a press photographer has been killed after stabbing an Israeli soldier. It's the West Bank's latest violent attack as recent clashes claim 37 lives.
Palestinian groups are calling it their day of rage. For these Israeli soldiers, the rage became all too real. Taking down a protester disguised as a news photographer as he took down one of their own. This stabbing attack is one of several across Israeli and Palestinian territories since September. But overnight there was a fiery flashpoint. Palestinian protesters torching the tomb of biblical figure Joseph, a direct hit on a Jewish holy site. It's prompted Israel to deploy 300 extra troops, setting up roadblocks across Jerusalem in a bid to secure its citizens. In this so-called holy war, the UN Security Council is calling for more diplomatic dialogue.
So I'd be open to meetings with Arab leaders and Palestinian leadership in order to stop this incitement and set the record straight.
It'll hold an emergency meeting next week. Hayden Nelson, 7 News.
Thanks, Andrew. Good morning again. 3 fishermen are lucky to have survived when their boat overturned off the South Queensland coast. After spending 3 hours holding onto its hull overnight, they were plucked from the water by marine rescue.
Without this boat, we'd be telling a very different story. When 3 Caboolture fishermen left land near Brisbane's Bribie Island, they planned to bring home a big catch. But nothing could prepare them for what happened next.
We just hit the sandbar and waves just kept coming in and flipped.
14-year-old Jamie Thomas and his 2 fishing buddies found themselves marooned on a reef called Gilligan's Island, with nothing but this hull to hang on to and no idea help was on the way.
There was a boat, but they weren't replying, and the phone kept cutting out while we were out there. We were pretty stressed out because they just flew straight over us.
With a changing tide and choppy conditions, minutes felt like hours. 2 hours later, when help arrived, all they could do was keep swimming.
These people were mighty pleased to see us, but the cold water had affected them.
With mild hypothermia and a few scratches.
Pretty much, I'm happy I'm out of the water.
This is a story they'll hang on to forever. Hayden Nelson, 7 News.
Guys, dozens of families have been left homeless after an out-of-control bushfire tore through southern Victoria. Over 50 homes have been lost in towns lining the Great Ocean Road as authorities hope for better conditions today.
For locals and holiday makers in southern Victoria, Christmas couldn't have been much worse. Overnight, 150 firefighters fought this 2,000-hectare blaze, burning close to the Great Ocean Road. 53 homes have been destroyed at Wye River and Separation Creek, with spot fires and ember attacks racing ahead of the blaze. 18 aircraft have been waterbombing from above, as dozens of trucks met the fire front on the ground. Locals in Lorne and Allenvale have been told to evacuate.
If you don't really need to be here, time to go, because if we leave it too long, the traffic will be just chaos.
Yesterday, a statewide heatwave brought a shocking scenario for the Country Fire Authority. Another significant blaze in Sunbury came close to property and sent residents fleeing.
The fires moved extremely fast. The reason for that is the fuels. The forest is just so dry.
This morning, a community meeting in Torquay will provide some clarity, with conditions expected to improve as the day goes on. Hayden Nelson, 7 News.
A man has died after being struck down by a falling tree in southeast Queensland. Emergency services did everything they could to save him as authorities dealt with the damage from wild storms across several states.
With storms across the east coast of the country, there was heartbreak in Hervey Bay. A man in his 60s was killed by a falling tree just after 7 o'clock last night. Emergency services tried to save him.
It was pretty scary because the power went out as well, so with the massive tree there that went down, we were pretty lucky.
Across Queensland from Brisbane to Boonah, strong winds and rain took everything in their path. 150,000 lightning bolts were recorded statewide, while in New South Wales, authorities responded to 200 calls for assistance. Overnight, a couple were pulled from rising floodwaters, one of 12 flood rescues across Sydney. As strong winds brought down trees across the city, lightning lit up its skyline. In Guildford, a car was crushed in a wall collapse, while wild weather left a big clean-up job in the Blue Mountains.
There's
flash flooding, not to enter the flash flooding, and be mindful of any fallen power lines.
Tasmanian authorities battling bushfires now had to turn their attention to floodwaters. Residents in Launceston were forced to evacuate while highways were closed across Hobart.
We have the St Mary's Evacuation Centre open, and that's for people who are experiencing significant flash flooding.
Storms are likely again today in Brisbane, Sydney and Canberra. Hayden Nelson, 7 News.